Welcome to episode 17 of Hoop Talk Fanatics. We are here with Field of 68, Greg Waddell, and we are excited to have him on to hear his thoughts on this upcoming NCAA tournament. And welcome to Hoop Talk Fanatics.
Thanks. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. So first, what are your thoughts on the first four games?
You talking the play-in games that kick off?
Yeah.
Well, I think the first one that's interesting is Indiana, Wyoming. I got an up close look at Indiana at the Big Ten tournament this week. I kept remarking that I don't understand how they were playing well. I think they're a very mediocre basketball team. I think the roster in general is not very good. However, they played their hearts out in Indianapolis, and it was led by Xavier Johnson, who was just dominant in the backcourt. He was the most energetic player the entire week. He was fueled by the crowd. It seemed like he really played up to the stage, and I'm wondering if that will translate into the NCAA tournament as well, because they're a different team when he gets going. So I think Indiana can take care of business against Wyoming, especially because they're pretty stout defensively internally. They don't give up a lot of easy buckets at the rim, and Wyoming really wants to overpower you and get to the rim. So I think that matchup bodes pretty well for Indiana. And then on the opposite side, I'll stay away from the 2 16 seed play-in games. I have some picks based on research there, but don't know a ton about those teams. But on the other side, Notre Dame against Rutgers, another Big Ten team that found their way into the play-in. Notre Dame, I think, is better than people want to give them credit for. One of my takes pre-tournament was that the ACC would have a little more success in the NCAA tournament than people expect them to, based on how bad the conference was. Notre Dame's got a kid who can be a lottery pick in Blake Wesley. Like, he is a top 20 talent in the entire sport right now. What scares me with Notre Dame is they don't have really any NCAA tournament experience. This is the first time any of these guys are going to be on this big stage. Rutgers group was a bucket away from a Sweet 16 last year, and I don't think that's lost on them. I think they want to at least get back into the round of 64 and see what they can make shake. And Ron Harper Jr. is tough. Him and Geo Baker are, really, you'll be hard pressed to find two better shot makers than the two of them. So I have the two Big Ten teams surviving, Indiana and Rutgers, but I've been wrong before, especially when it comes to the Big Ten. So we'll see what happens.
Rutgers I think Rutgers is a very, very talented team this year, especially having Ron Harper Jr. Going crazy with his offensive talent. And I think that Rutgers will definitely beat Notre Dame. And I think Indiana has the ability to beat Wyoming. I think that they just have a better talented team than Wyoming does. And I'm interested to see how Xavier Johnson plays against Wyoming, and it should be a good tight game, but I think Indiana will pull it out. So continuing on, what do you think about San Diego State matching up against Providence?
It's actually, so it's South Dakota State who's up against Providence round one.
Oh, my bad.
all good. Those SD states will get you. Providence is one of my two favorite teams in the country, along with Iowa this year. I've sort of fallen in love with them, even though the metrics don't say that they're very good. The record certainly says otherwise. And I get how important metrics are. I use that as the basis of all of my betting stuff that I do. But I do think there's a discrepancy between what the metrics say and what reality is with Providence. I think that they are very, very good in close games for a reason. They have shot makers and tough shot makers in the backcourt. They have a really strong internal presence in Nate Watson. I just don't see Providence losing to a team that is really a one-trick pony, which is what South Dakota State is. They're a great offense. They're a horrible defense. They strictly just want to outscore you. And I don't think that gets it done against a team that's as tough on both sides of the ball, in my opinion, as Providence is. So I am kind of bucking the trend. I know a lot of people have picked South Dakota State as their big upset pick. I don't see that happening at all. Providence is 17-0 against teams outside the top 50 in defensive efficiency, and South Dakota State's in the 200s. So I don't think there's going to be much resistance at all. I think Providence will win this one pretty comfortably.
What do you think about Boise State matching up against Memphis?
Yeah, I think it's one of those tricky ones where the committee kind of teases a potential second round matchup people would like to see, which is Memphis Gonzaga. Memphis is a scary team to have to play before you even get to the Sweet 16. I'm leaning Boise State here. It's a true toss-up of a game to me, but I think Boise State's quietly been really, really good. In a way where like maybe Memphis has loudly been good, but also loudly bad for much of the season. Boise State's just been under the radar, taking care of business. They just won their conference tournament, a conference that included Colorado State, Wyoming, San Diego State. Like the Mountain West Conference was no slouch this year. And Boise State was the class of that once it got into conference tournament play. So I feel like Boise State's going to kind of flip a middle finger up to the matchup people want to see. And Penny Hardaway in March is a pretty fun person to fade and be on the opposite side of. So I'll take Boise State.
I think the next two are really intriguing games. Marquette, UNC, and San Francisco, Murray State. What do you think about those two matchups?
Yeah, North Carolina Marquette's a fun one. It's the quote unquote Dawson Garcia revenge game. The player who's no longer active with North Carolina, but he transferred to North Carolina from Marquette, where he was one of Marquette's best players last season. This one can really go either way. I lean North Carolina just because I think they're the more talented team and a version of two teams that sort of want to play the same way, right? Like both these teams are balanced offensively and defensively. I get that Marquette is more of like a grind you down defensive style, like the old Shaka Smart Havoc style thing. But, they haven't really been doing that of late. They haven't been great over the last month and a half of the season. North Carolina to me has been better. I think they won 12 of their last 15 games. And Armando Bacot can dominate this game inside. Marquette doesn't have much resistance at the center spot. So I lean North Carolina. I wouldn't be surprised if either team wins. The one thing I will say, I've seen a lot of people pick North Carolina and a couple of people pick Marquette to beat Baylor in the second round. I don't see that happening at all. I know Baylor's injured, but I do think they're clearly better than both of those teams. Marquette and North Carolina have both been pretty inconsistent over the course of the season. So I'll go North Carolina in round one, but then they'll lose to Baylor in round two. And then the second game, Murray State, San Francisco. I mean, I'm grumpy with the committee that they put these two teams together in round one. They're both very fiery, talented mid-majors that are capable of making a deep run. But not only did they get forced to play each other in round one, the winner is going to have to go through Kentucky, who I think is the best team in the country when they're fully healthy. So they're not really in a good spot to make a deep run in this tournament, either of them. I will say that I like Murray State to win the game. San Francisco's 0-6 against teams in the KenPom top 30. And they only played 3 teams, don't get me wrong, but they lost to Loyola Chicago on the neutral site. They lost to St. Mary's twice, and then they lost to Gonzaga 3 times this season. They just haven't been up for the challenge when they've played the elite of the elite teams. I think Murray State is closer to that tier of teams than it is the team San Francisco's taking care of. So I'll lean the Racers, who I think is the best mid-major in the country. And unfortunately, I wish I could pick them to go further, but they're not getting through Kentucky in round 2.
I was actually watching the ESPN marathon audio today, and Seth Greenberg had North Carolina as his sleeper, and I completely agree with him. They've been a team in the ACC that has been really intriguing, talented team, and I think that they can make some sound in that game against Marquette. So next up is Loyola, Chicago, and Ohio State. What do you think about that matchup, and who do you see winning that game?
Yeah, I've got Loyola. This is one of the games I feel strongest about of the first round. I have been very anti-Ohio State for the last 2 months. I don't think they defend at all. They remind me of the old Iowa Hawkeye teams where you could just say this team doesn't play any defense. They just want to outscore you. To me, that's Ohio State, but I also think Ohio State's pretty limited even offensively. They've got 2 guys who are killers, EJ Liddell and Malachi Branham. I think their third best option is a liability. And it reminds me of early 2010 Michigan basketball. They had like Manny Harris and Deshaun Sims. If you remember those teams, they had nothing else. And those teams ended up being like 500-ish teams in the record column. Ohio State's lost 4 of their last 5 games. Chris Holtmann has consistently, I don't want to say underperformed, but his teams never play their best at the end of the season. They play really well through like February, and then they hit a wall and just kind of wear themselves out. And Loyola is comfortable in this style matchup. It's going to be a pretty slow tempo game. They don't really take bad shots. Their offense is going to get whatever they want against Ohio State. And I think that's a pretty bad matchup for a Buckeye team that kind of needed a team that plays a little more stupid on the offensive side to feel good. Loyola is going to take care of the ball. They're going to take great shots. They're really experienced. So I love Loyola. I wouldn't be surprised if Loyola wins very comfortably in this spot. It's one of my strongest plays for the first round.
So Miami plays USC. And what are your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I like USC in the spot. I think the country as a whole is 2 down on USC. They've only lost 3 games all year. I think they're I want to say they're 22-3 on the season when they play teams that are not UCLA or Arizona. And I might even be shortchanging them. It might be 25-3. They've been great against teams that aren't the elite teams in the Pac-12, and you can't really blame them for not being up to the challenge of beating Arizona and UCLA. Miami's not as good as those teams. Miami is the type of team that USC has had success with this season. Miami plays on one side of the ball. That's offense. They're a very good offensive team. They're a horrible defensive team. USC's got some bucket getters. Drew Peterson, Boogie Ellis, Isaiah Mobley, all 3 of them can get you a bucket in a variety of ways in the backcourt, on the wing, in the front court. So I think USC is going to kind of comfortably play this game. I don't know that they'll blow Miami out, but I think USC is very capable of getting the job done and getting a victory.
What do you think about Virginia Tech against Kansas and Chattanooga against Illinois?
Who was the first one? Virginia Tech against Texas?
Yeah.
I like Virginia Tech there. I actually like Virginia Tech to make a run to the Sweet 16 in this tournament. They're playing great right now. They won the ACC tournament. Texas is just a team that's good. Don't get me wrong. They're good. The metrics say they're very good, but they're not as good as they should be. If you look at their roster and you look at who their coach is, and I think part of that's the result of having so many new faces that haven't played together before. I think they're honestly still figuring out their identity right now. I don't think they have really asserted how they want to win games. They're playing a Virginia Tech team who's super experienced, a bunch of guys who have played together for 4 or 5 years now. Everybody on Virginia Tech's team can shoot the lights out. They know how they want to win games. And honestly, it might just be the Texas program. I know Chris Beard is in year 1, but I just can't associate Texas with anything other than losing early in the NCAA tournament right now. We'll see if Chris Beard changes that. But I have Virginia Tech winning that. And then I have Virginia Tech beating Purdue as well. Talk about another team that doesn't defend. That's Purdue. They just want to outscore you. And I think they got dealt a pretty nightmarish matchup for them in a Virginia Tech team that can really score the ball. So I've got the Hokies going all the way to the Sweet 16. And then what was the second game that you asked about?
Chattanooga and Illinois.
Yeah, I think Chattanooga is going to pull the upset here. And the biggest reason why is that I don't trust Illinois and their game plan right now. I was in person on site at the Big Ten tournament, and they wanted to run every single thing through Andre Curbelo. That's a horrible decision if you're an Illinois fan, because they're 1-6 in games where Andre Curbelo's played more than 20 minutes this season. They're much better when they play through Alfonso Plummer and Trent Frazier. two very efficient, high level, high scoring guards around Kofi Cockburn. And Curbelo erases that. As brilliant as he can be at times, it takes away the special makeup of this Illinois team. I'm not saying they're going to do that. In fact, if they just sort of glued Curbelo to the bench, I'd like Illinois pretty comfortably in this matchup. But if they do, it opens the door for a Chattanooga team who can absolutely play. They've got experience, they've got skill, they've got a high major level center in Silvio De Sousa, who's not going to be punked by Kofi Cockburn. So I lean Chattanooga just because I have questions on the identity of Illinois right now. But I think either team loses to Houston in the second round after that game.
Next up is Iowa State LSU.
Yeah, it's the ugliest game of the tournament. I think LSU is going to win. They don't have their coach, but I don't think it matters. They have the fifth best defense in the country. This is an Iowa State team we're talking about that's lost 3 straight games and scored 41 points or less in 2 of those 3. One of those games, they scored 36 points. Getting an LSU team that's that good defensively is not good timing for them. And I don't think Will Wade, I want to give Will Wade a little credit. I think he consistently built fantastic rosters at LSU, and we know how he built them. That's why he's no longer going to be the coach. But I don't think Will Wade had anything to do with how good this team is defensively. If you look at Will Wade's entire career at LSU, they never fielded good defenses. They never had a top 50 defense until this season. It's not like they changed anything schematically. It's the makeup of the roster. It's guys like Tari Eason and other guys who have bought in on the defensive side of the ball this year. So I think that defense is still going to be there, and that's just a horrible matchup for Iowa State. So give me LSU.
So there's 2 more on my list. Davidson, Michigan State, and TCU, Seton Hall.
I think Davidson beats Michigan State. It pains me to say it, but it's just a nightmare matchup in my opinion. Davidson, a team that always wins the turnover battle. They're top 15 in the country in that category. Michigan State turns the ball over like it's their job, and that's when they have their normal healthy point guards. Tyson Walker may not play in this game, and if he does play, he may be visibly hobbled on a minutes restriction. So I know Davidson's going to win that battle. They're going to have more possessions. Davidson does a really good job at limiting offensive rebounds. It's not like Michigan State's going to steal more possessions that way. Davidson's got 6 guys that can make threes. Every single person in the rotation shoots 38% from 3 or more. If Davidson hits 10 threes and wins the turnover battle in this game, that leaves Michigan State in a really tough spot. And I don't know where they would turn. They're not exactly a team that has an alpha offensively. I think they'll probably be pressured into some tough-ish shots from Max Christie and Malik Hall. And, I'm more confident Davidson is going to execute on their game plan than Michigan State will in this matchup. So I have Davidson winning that game. I actually have Davidson beating Duke in the next round as well. I love this team. I love their shooting, and I think Duke doesn't defend at all. So if there is one Cinderella I think can make a deep run this year, it would be the Wildcats, and Foster Loyer gets his revenge. And then the last game you asked, it was TCU Seton Hall.
Yeah.
I like Seton Hall in this spot. The more and more research I did, these 2 teams are very, very similar. So I wish there was something I could point at that says, hey, I really believe Seton Hall's the much better matchup, because I do, just eye test wise, feel pretty strongly about Seton Hall. In fact, so strongly, I have Seton Hall all the way to my Elite 8. If they get to Arizona, I think Arizona has a lot of questions right now with Kirk Reese being injured. And I think Seton Hall is just a group full of gamers, guys that show up in the big moment, guys that aren't going to get intimidated. They're going to hit the offensive glass. They're going to bang inside. And then they've got shot makers in the backcourt and a bunch of different bodies they can throw at you. So I like Seton Hall to beat TCU. And like I said, to make a little bit of a run once they get out of that game. I know they've been relatively hot lately. I want to say, I think they were 9-3 in their last 12 games, and TCU finished the season on a pretty cold stretch down the stretch. So give me the Pirates, and I like them to make a run.
So what are your potential first round upsets?
I think we talked about a lot of them, to be honest with you. I like Chattanooga over Illinois. I like Davidson over Michigan State. I like Virginia Tech over Texas. If you're looking for a really long shot one, I keep thinking about Colgate over Wisconsin. Colgate has the second best 3-point percentage offense in the country. Wisconsin doesn't guard the three great. They're just fine in that category. Johnny Davis might be hurt. He looked clearly hurt at the Big Ten tournament. And if he wasn't hurt, he just looked horrible. And if you look at Wisconsin's record this year, they've played 8 games against teams outside the top 200 on KenPom. And 6 of those 8, in fact, the 6 most recent games were all single-digit games. So it's not like they blow bad teams out. Colgate's not a bad team. They've won a ton of games in a row. And they're the type of team that can shoot the lights out and shoot their way to an upset. So I keep going back and forth. Like I said, I started with Colgate, then I flipped to Wisconsin. I think I'm going to lean Colgate by the time I have to formally submit a bracket, but we'll see if my brain can get me there.
So what are your thoughts on the logistic issue with Colorado State?
I don't think it's that big of a deal, to be honest with you. I think, if the NCAA tournament or the NCAA truly is unable to communicate, that's obviously a horrible problem. And it leaves teams in a very bad spot, let alone a mid-major who is not going to be able to charter a plane for themselves across the country. But it sounds like that got resolved very quickly. It sounds like 20 minutes after Matt Norlander tweeted that, they announced that they had a flight. So I'm assuming their coach, Medved, asked Norlander to tweet that and was frustrated and quickly got their answer. I don't think it's going to affect the game really at all. And honestly, I'm a little curious how much Norlander had to do with actually getting them the flight in the first place. Maybe, it may have just been a lack of communication, but the flight was ready. Who knows? But yeah, I think they'll be ready for the Michigan game, and that won't have any lasting effect.
So I think we touched on the Cinderella part. Do you see any other teams besides North Carolina, or no?
My deepest Cinderella that I said was Seton Hall. I have them to the Elite Eight. I have Davidson to the Sweet 16, beating Duke, but that's about it.
And lastly, what are your final 4 picks?
I've got Gonzaga against Kentucky. I've got Villanova against Iowa. I have Kentucky beating Gonzaga. I think Kentucky's the most talented team in the country when they're healthy, and I am betting that Kellen Grady is going to get right. I have Iowa beating Villanova. I think Iowa's the second best team in the country right now and has been for over a month. Keegan Murray is the best player in the country. I think he's going to have a very special run in March. And then I have Kentucky ultimately beating Iowa in a game where I'm just going to trust Coach Cal a little more than I trust Fran McCaffrey. And I think the talent gets it done for the Wildcats.
It's definitely going to be really exciting starting tonight and all the way through the weekend. And thank you so much for hopping on. And we hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks.